Well, just real quick before we start, in this video we just assembled the loop with some alpha cool parts. The radiators themselves are alpha cool, so we finish it up with what we have. Not really impressed with either of the alpha cool products. The block wasn't bad, but the cooling block for the NVMe, I would not recommend that. I don't like the way it's designed. I'm not very impressed at all with it. The cooling block for the CPU is okay. It's okay. I don't have anything to compare it to for efficiency wise, but that's what we use alpha cool parts on it. You'll see a lot of the tubing cutting. I didn't do the B-roll stuff that a lot of people do. I just built it, took the mobile camera with me, took shots of it. So it's not a, I didn't set up the studio to do this. I just, or the cameras and all that. You know, it's bad enough getting about as blind with the cataracts and everything I got in my eyes. It's hard to see inside that black case, but I think it turned out well. Give me your comments on what you think about the appearance of it. I show you the initial filling of the system in the small rad in the 280. Didn't show filling on the top. I didn't show burping it when we had the noise or record any of the sound levels before we burped it. I think it works out pretty well. I know I will differ in how I implemented this just as a poor, humble, old engineer versus some of these YouTubers out there that know everything that I do not. And I don't know a lot about what they do. However, you know, I go back to the old days when we first kind of started doing some of this stuff. It became mainstream for you know, high-end PCs. I guess we did it on servers and other things. Perhaps we've water-cooled transmitters. We've used water cooling before. We'll get to that in a different video, but here we just kind of put her together. This is the block that I got for the NVMe. I would not buy this again. I am unimpressed with the engineering on it. The little clip that we attach to, the plastic clip, well, plastic doesn't really normally give us any thermal dissipation out of it, so it doesn't make much sense to put the thermal pad below it if you have a two-faced or chips on both sides, two-sided NVMe as I have with the 705. It puts a tremendous amount of pressure on it. It snaps together difficultly. And like I say, we're only cooling from the top side down. I don't like the way that's done. Plastic, cheap plastic, not impressed. This is a, I would not do this again purchase. Now looking at this, we do have our block. Has a piece of plastic film on there to keep it clean, I guess, and non-scratch. We'll have to pull that off. Then we have two 0.5 millimeter heat pads here. We do have with the T705, it is double-sided, so we have to use the two thin ones. And the instructions say to snap it into this piece of plastic. Not impressed with this setup being plastic right there. Also, I'm not sure how tightly it's going to push against that non-inexpensive Gen 5 drive, but we're going to put it together, and it appears that we're going to have to do some major excavation to get rid of that back heatsink right there, because I think it's going to put too much pressure on the contacts up in here, because it's made to obviously touch the back side of the NVMe. So by the time we add another pad, a 0.5 millimeter pad, and this piece of plastic here, it's going to be too tight. We're going to have to take this thing apart. All right, well, we did have to pull the pad off of the under support. And if I can move my hand out of the way to set this in there, it goes in, sits down, and we should be able to, get my finger out of the way, move that latch around. I just have to do it when I'm not holding a camera. Well, we're about to put on the block for the CPU. We have our instructions, our block, which is a heavy rascal, and of course we have both the A and D and our Intel brackets. We'll use the Intel brackets. We have the back plate, got a little bit of sticky on it so it'll hold it in place for us so we don't have to fight that. That's good, and we'll put her on. It goes on just about like you expect it to. The Intel brackets just slide in like that. Don't forget to remove the anti-scratch pad on the back. And our little standoffs just go into the board, into the back plate. Well, I'm going to pick a bone with the German engineers who came up with this. I don't understand their logic, and I'm not going to do it the way the picture shows, which of course, let's say a little logo being at the top corner. We're going to obviously run the coolant right down on top of the CPU so it's just directly centered, but I think I want to run the water this way and let the upper end allow for an air bubble. Should we get any air bubbles in here, I want it to be where I can turn it off and maybe have the air migrate up to the highest point, which would be in that line, which would be in the return. So I'm going to do it that way. There's also something I have to pick a bone with. I don't know if I can do this without looking in ahead of time. There we go. This, I don't know if I can show it well. Let me get a torch. I think there's an inadequate amount of threads at the top of that. We can go around a couple times, but I certainly would like to see more than maybe 3 turns or so. I don't know what it turns out to be, but there's just not much threads on the top for our little barrel nut-like things to go on. And there we have our thermal paste on. We'll drop the block on there, tighten her down evenly around in an X pattern, and then we'll set this off into the box and start connecting hoses. Incoming opinion alert, as if you're watching me, you need me to give you an opinion alert. A couple of things when I show you the thermal paste, it's a little bit much, and remember, thermal pastes are not as conductive as metal, but we've been using them since dinosaurs were in nappies. It doesn't connect or conduct electricity, so it doesn't connect your outsides to ground or pins if it leaks over. So a little much is better than too little. You don't want to use so much in a confined environment so that if you put it in there, it makes a terrible mess. You certainly don't want to use it on something like a GPU or something like that, where it can get under and lift up pads on a surface mounted type of component. You don't want to cause a hydraulic jack in it trying to find a space to go and rip something. But in general, it's better to be a little more generous and a little dry. But my opinion is you're not very bright particularly if you take the integrated heat shield off, you delid your processor. Now, if it's an old junk, something other, I wouldn't care about that. If you have copper mods, yes, copper conducts better than the thermal paste, but guess it also conducts electricity, so that's a stupid thing to do. It's not as stupid as liquid metal in my brain. I mean, it's an opinion. You're putting something in there that conducts electricity in a spot that you can't actually actively see how it's going down, and you won't know if it spills over. And if it spills over, it can ruin your investment. To me, being an old country boy and old engineer, that's what we call stupid. It's just not a bright thing to do. It's ill-advised. I could clean up the language a little bit, but it's certainly something I wouldn't do. Any increase in performance is not going to be worth the risk I'm taking to do something conductive around there. So we'll look at this thermal paste. This is a little bit much. Hey, appreciate you watching. Do me a favor if you will, subscribe to the channel, either the YouTube or the Rumble channel, which this appears in. And if you can, check the notification bell or settings to make sure that you get notified when new videos are posted. Appreciate it. All right, I think we've got it all hooked up. Our blue connection is to the vertical radiator. The red one is to the top set of fans, and the green one that we see up there, just there, is to the bottom set of fans where we are bringing air across that smaller radiator. Now the loop, we come out of the pump, go down, pump upwards to the very top of the radiator where we do have a fill port, comes down, fills up this side, goes out of that side, directly into the center of the CPU. Out of the center of the CPU, we come out, we go into the second radiator. The second radiator then pre-chills it back down before going back up to around here to the NVMe, the Gen 5. Out of the Gen 5, comes around into the video card, out of the video card, going to the pump. So we should be purging our air bubbles in our loop. And again, we can fill this one up here. We fill the big one up there. We drain them on the bottoms. And we should be able to do it fairly expeditiously. Now we have our serial ATAs going in the side. We have our Type A USBs. We got two of those, one to the front panel. I guess the other one's to the front panel too. Then we got the Type C there to the front panel, goes in that side. Our video card is hooked up. Our power is down at the bottom. The extra power, main power, is to the side where it should be. Let me turn that sideways. And we see Dr. Debug, our start switches here. So we'll just have to start filling it up, see how badly it leaks. Well, we have pulled the plug out of the bottom radiator, and we've got our funnel in there, and we're going to fill her up as best we can. Let's pray she doesn't leak. Well, before we button everything up, I think we're going to do that. We'll leave the front off just to make sure we can inspect for leakage. But if you haven't been with the progress or project from the beginning, you see we've got 3 140 fans on top of that radiator, which is 60 deep. It's all copper. Did I not tell you about this? A lot of people, well, I don't look like Cousin It, but you know, I am an engineer, so I figured that little hole right there on the drain, if I had access to it, I could burp the system and get rid of the noise. All right, let's look here beneath the filter. If I can get my fingers to work. There we go. And you'll notice, you see right there, we have, well, these were a bit of an extravagance. We're using the very good, I think, Be Quiet fans. Their specs are very good, but see, they have a switch. And I have that on the very low mode. So right now, it's just everything's on default. Same thing with the intake on the back side of that big radiator. All right, got some light in on the subject. I think we showed you the temperature sensors up there. We can read them in the BIOS. Of course, we have that nice chrome and black machine kind of, you know, server kind of action going on down at the bottom. These are not necessary because we're not going to leave it out where the fingers can get to it. But we see we get the basic idea. We've got the SATAs or the serial ATAs piped in on the back. All of the connections. Looks pretty good to me. Now, I've already done a little talk about this. This is upside down because I think it's best to bring the water in, hit the middle, and then allow it to kind of work bubbles up into that return line, which of course goes down to the GPU cooler. Again, I'm American. I'm an American engineer, not a German engineer, so I'm not real excited about everything the way it turned out, but I did pretty good. Got it mask off right there. Got to figure out how to turn those little lights off on the RAMs. And on the front, maybe I'll leave one. I don't know. You tell me in the comments what you think. And, you know, let's look at one more thing around the back. Okay. Like I said, it's a full tower case. Paid dearly for it. But I think it does everything I want. I wanted something with some growth. Now, if you notice here, it doesn't look too bad. Open up. Oh, a rat's nest. Looks pretty good. Oh, a rat's nest. Okay, I can live with that. Now, you know we have these swing out so that we can put our serial ATAs on there or whatever we have. We might be able to put some U.2s on there if our cables are long enough. That would be cool. Now, I guess that's just about it. Tell me what you think about the chrome and black look. Because I don't want to look like a gamer station. I want to look more like a workstation, something like that. Anyway, you tell me. It had most of a 2 liters in the system. That's what was left over out of 2 liters. So it's pretty hefty. And we don't hear the bubbling. Because as I mentioned, I planned this as a burping valve. And it worked pretty good. Make sure that my pump always has a loop to it so it can push up, cool in this section, come up, hit the CPU, come down, hit the second cooler, go back, hit the rest of it, come back. And if you'll notice, it's not quite the highest thing in the system, but we do have the return above it. So since we got a little bit of a pressurized thing, we ought to be able to keep everything good and wet.